On my 29th birthday, my mother-in-law handed me a velvet ring box across a table set with crystal and candlelight. Inside wasn't jewelry, it was a pen, heavy, gold-tipped, the kind you use to sign things that end. But to arrive at that moment, you have to understand how Victoria Cross trained me to disappear long before she ever tried to erase me. I'm Amelia Cross, married to her son Daniel for 4 years, together for 6. We met in the unglamorous corner of a fundraiser, both reaching for the last lukewarm coffee. He was kind in the way decent men are kind. Remembered my dog's name, texted to ask if I got home safe, warmed his hands on paper cups, and laughed with his whole face. I fell in love with the version of him that existed outside his mother's gravity. I just didn't know how strong her pull was. Victoria announces herself before she arrives. Heels that sound like verdicts, perfume that turns heads, the practiced smile of a woman who never doubts the room is hers. The first time she shook my hand, her eyes slid down to my apron. "Ah," she said, tasting the word like a seed she might spit out. "Hospitality." "It's a restaurant," I said. "I'm a server at DeLuca's." "Of course," she replied, as if I'd confirmed a rumor. Later, she told Daniel, within earshot, "Sweet girl. Practical. Let's make sure she doesn't get too comfortable there. DeLuca's is not where dreams go to die. It's where they pay their rent." Copper pans clang like applause in the kitchen. Basil and garlic lift from the line in holy spirals. And the Friday night din is a tide you learn to surf. I'm good at my job. Balanced trays, balanced tone. A memory for details that makes regulars feel seen. Mr. DeLuca calls me steady hands, which in his world is the highest praise. Elena Ruiz, my favorite bartender and reluctant therapist, claims I can de-escalate a table faster than she can shake a martini. When tips were thin and feet were blistered, Elena would slide me a lemonade and say, "You're building something, Mila. It's just not made of marble yet." Daniel liked that about me once, the grit, the making do. But he also liked being the son who never upset his mother's view of the family. In Victoria's view, my apron was a costume I should outgrow as soon as possible, preferably into something that looked better in photos. Dinners at the Cross's house were choreography. Marissa, Daniel's younger sister, filmed everything for her followers. Unboxings, table settings, stray comments out of context, all uploaded with captions about elegance and legacy. Victoria held court at the head, doling out compliments like visas. Daniel and I were seated where the camera found him and lost me. If I spoke about doubling sections during a rush or calming a difficult guest, Victoria would nod as if indulging a child. "One day," she'd say, patting my hand, "you'll find something more fitting." "What would fitting look like?" I asked once. She smiled with the warmth of a chandelier. "We'll guide you." Guidance looked like forwarding me articles titled "Careers Worth Marrying," sending job postings I hadn't asked for, reminding me that Daniel is on partner track and image matters, as though my existence were a line item in a quarterly report. Daniel, caught between, would squeeze my knee under the table, the secret signal for "please don't." His silences gathered like dust no one admitted was there. There were small rebellions. I took extra shifts to cushion our savings when his bonus came in lower than expected. I paid the car repair before anyone noticed the warning light. I bought a second-hand blazer and started sending out applications, late at night with my laptop warm on my legs, to places where hospitality is a craft and not a rung. Boutique hotels, event programs that read like novels. I didn't announce it. I just started. Elena proofread my cover letters between pores and underlined my strengths with a Sharpie. "You are not less because you carry plates," she said. "You are more because you never drop one." On the morning everything began to tip, Victoria called DeLuca's and asked for me by my full name. "Family dinner on Friday," she sang when I picked up. "At Bellinton, we're celebrating you." "Me?" I glanced at the line where flame licked the rim of a pan. "Your birthday, darling. You only turned 29 once. Wear something classic. We'll take photos." The way she said photos made it sound like a promise and a threat. When I told Elena, she raised an eyebrow and slid me a short espresso like a talisman. Celebrating you, she repeated, where the forks cost a shift. It's a gesture, I said, though my stomach tightened. It's a stage, she said. Be careful what role they hand you. That week, Daniel was sunlight and cloud cover. He brought home flowers that didn't come with a florist card, but he answered his phone on the balcony, voice lowered. When I asked how work was, he said busy and turned the TV up. When I asked about Friday, he smiled too quickly. Mom just wants it to be special. For whom? For us, he said, and kissed my forehead like punctuation. On Thursday, a man from the Bellinton called to confirm our reservation for 12 and to ask about any special presentation during dessert. Presentation. I stared at the phone long after I hung up, imagining sparklers and a cake with my name piped in script. Elena found me polishing glassware that didn't need it. Your face says fire alarm, she said. Dessert presentation, I said, at a place where they plate emotions. Is it possible, she asked carefully, that Victoria is setting you up to make you small in public so she can feel big in photos? Yes, I said, because naming things has always been my first defense. Friday came dressed like a magazine spread. String lights woven through olive trees lining the valet. A host who knew our name before we gave it. A pianist who sounded like he'd never lost a thing. I wore the only dress I own that doesn't need explaining. Black, clean lines, the kind that lets you be the subject instead of the frame. Daniel looked beautiful and nervous. Victoria looked like victory. Birthday girl, she trilled, air kissing my cheeks without touching skin. Marissa's phone hovered like a small moon, capturing angles. Everyone is so thrilled you could join us. I told the manager you might cry. From joy, I said lightly. Of course, she said, eyes glittering. What else is there to cry about? Menus appeared like invitations to be reasonable. Champagne arrived unasked. Daniel kept checking his watch in a way he thought was subtle. I tried to catch his eyes. He gave me a smile that apologized for nothing and everything. The food was art I wanted to devour and couldn't taste. Conversation thinned whenever I spoke and swelled when Victoria did. Somewhere between the second course and the third, I felt the prickle you feel the moment before a storm reaches the house. A shift in pressure, a hush on the leaves. The pianist drifted into Happy Birthday dressed in jazz, and a server I didn't recognize appeared at my shoulder with a velvet box on a silver tray. The lid cracked open to reveal the pen nested in satin. The table applauded on instinct. Marissa leaned in for the shot. Victoria pressed her fingertips together like a prayer answered. Make a wish, she said sweetly, and sign for it. Daniel swallowed. The room tilted slightly toward us, the way a theater leans into a monologue. I looked at the pen, at my husband, at the woman who had never once asked what I wanted beyond what she wanted for me. I smiled. Not the polite one, not the practiced one. The one I wear when the floor stops pretending to be water and remembers it is wood. All right, I said. Let's open gifts. And that is where the night began to shift. At a table polished bright enough to reflect not just our faces, but the truth beneath them. The pen lay in its velvet cradle like a weapon disguised as a gift. My fingers hovered above it, not touching, not yet. The applause at the table softened into curious murmurs. Forks clinked against plates, and from the corner of my eye I saw Marissa raise her phone higher, hungry for the shot that would go viral in her curated little world. Go on, Amelia, Victoria coaxed, her voice dripping with the satisfaction of a cat presenting a half-dead bird. This is the beginning of your new chapter. We thought it would be better to handle this like a family, civilized, graceful, and timely. Civilized, graceful, timely. Words she used when she wanted cruelty to sound like charity. I lifted the pen carefully, letting the weight of it rest in my palm. It was heavier than it looked. That, I thought, was fitting. Divorce was never light. Divorce papers, I said softly, though my voice carried across the polished table. The pianist faltered on a note. Daniel cleared his throat but didn't meet my eyes. It's for the best, Amelia. We've talked about how different we are. Mom just wanted to humiliate me on my birthday, I finished for him, still staring at the pen. The silence that followed wasn't polite, it was jagged. Guests at nearby tables leaned in, their curiosity sharper than knives. Victoria only smiled, pleased with her stage. Now, let's not be dramatic. It's a clean break, dear. Daniel needs someone who fits the family's future, and you'll have freedom to, well, find something more suited to your skills. There it was again. That delicate contempt, that suggestion that waiting tables was a crime against legacy. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. I looked around the table. Marissa smirked over her phone, thumbs ready to caption my downfall. Daniel's hand twisted the napkin in his lap, his mouth opening and closing without words. Victoria leaned back, confident that her performance was flawless, that her little scene would cement me as an afterthought in their family narrative. What none of them knew, what none of them could know, was that I had already written a different ending. For weeks, while Victoria schemed and Daniel drifted in her orbit, I had been building something quietly. Applications, interviews, late-night calls with recruiters who actually valued my experience. Just 3 days earlier, an email had landed in my inbox. An offer from the Crescent Hotel, one of the most exclusive luxury hotels in the city. The kind of place Victoria bragged about brunching in, but would never have imagined me working at. I hadn't told a soul, not Elena, not even Daniel. It wasn't fear, it was instinct. This was mine, and I wasn't going to let anyone twist it before it was ready. I placed the pen back into its box with deliberate care, like setting down a blade before anyone saw the cut. "Thank you," I said finally, lifting my eyes to meet Victoria's. "It's a thoughtful gift, but you should know something." Her smile flickered, almost imperceptibly. "Oh? I've already started my new chapter," I said. My voice didn't tremble, it rang clear, steady. "One that doesn't need your permission." The words hung there, unexpected, unsettling. Marissa's phone wavered. Daniel's napkin tore in his fists. And for the first time that evening, Victoria's eyes narrowed. Just a fraction, like she had caught the scent of smoke, but couldn't yet see the fire. I leaned back in my chair, folded my hands calmly on the tablecloth, and let the weight of my secret sit quietly between us. Revenge didn't always roar. Sometimes it waited, patient and certain, until the perfect stage had been built by the very people who thought they were in control. And my stage was almost ready. Long before that velvet box appeared at the Bellinton, the cracks had been spreading, fine lines in plaster that only widened with time. I just hadn't wanted to admit how deep they ran. When Daniel and I first married, I believed we could build a life apart from his family's orbit. We had a modest apartment, secondhand furniture, and nights filled with cheap pasta and laughter that drowned out the noise of the world. He told me my work ethic impressed him, that he loved how I carried myself with pride, even in a uniform. Back then, he made me feel like my place at DeLuca's wasn't temporary. It was simply part of my story. But Victoria never let him forget who held the strings. She'd call in the middle of our dinners, and he'd answer. She'd show up unannounced on Sundays, sweeping through our kitchen like a queen in exile, leaving behind critiques disguised as concern. "Amelia has such potential," she'd sigh, as though I weren't standing there, but perhaps in a different lane. Daniel never argued. He'd place a hand on my shoulder later when the door shut behind her, whispering apologies that felt thinner each time. "You know how she is. It's easier not to push back. Easier for him, exhausting for me." The shift was gradual, like water wearing down stone. I'd come home late from a double shift, feet screaming, only to find him scrolling through Marissa's posts of rooftop cocktails. He'd look up, smile faintly, and ask, "How was work?" His tone made it sound like a hobby. When I mentioned applying for management positions, he hesitated. "Maybe wait until you have more experience. Hotels want polish, Amelia. Mom says." That phrase, "Mom says," It was a constant refrain, as if her voice carried more weight than mine ever could. The more I pushed, the more he retreated into silence. And silence, I learned, can be heavier than shouting. I remember one night in particular, months before the birthday dinner. I had just gotten home after training a new hire and covering 2 absent coworkers. I dropped onto the couch, ready to tell Daniel about a compliment from a couple who asked for me by name. Instead, he told me his mother had found him a list of appropriate connections for me to explore. "She thinks you do well in retail," he said, as if delivering good news. I laughed then, not because it was funny, but because the absurdity of it nearly crushed me. "Retail?" I asked. "Victoria thinks folding sweaters in a mall is more respectable than running a floor at DeLuca's?" "She's just trying to help," he said. "No, Daniel. She's trying to replace me." His silence was my answer. Looking back now, I see how much of myself I gave away, piece by piece. I thought if I proved my worth, if I worked harder, smiled, longer, held my tongue, I could fit into their frame. But frames aren't made to expand. They're made to confine. So when Victoria slid those divorce papers across the table, she wasn't breaking something new. She was simply finishing what had already been cracking in the dark. The difference was, I wasn't the same woman anymore. I'd stopped waiting for Daniel to stand up. I'd stopped hoping Victoria would change her tune. I'd stopped believing silence was strength. I had already chosen my own stage. And soon, they would see just how brightly I could stand without them. When you've been pushed into the background long enough, survival instincts sharpen in silence. Mine whispered one truth. If I didn't build a way out, Victoria would write the ending for me. So I started applying. Quietly, secretly, late nights, when Daniel drifted off with the glow of his phone on his face, I'd sit by the kitchen window with my laptop humming and coffee gone cold. I combed through postings for boutique hotels, event venues, luxury resorts, places where hospitality wasn't a euphemism for servitude, but a craft. I wasn't naive. I knew competition was brutal. But if I could memorize the wine list at DeLuca's and juggle 12 tables during a rush, I could manage anything. Still, doubt crept in like condensation. Every rejection email landed heavy. "Thank you for your interest, but..." I started to expect those words. Sometimes, after the 3rd or 4th in a week, I'd close the laptop and stare at my reflection in the dark window, wondering if Victoria was right, if I would always be the woman in an apron, easily dismissed. That's when Elena Ruiz became my anchor. She'd slide me cappuccinos on break and ask, "How many applications today?" I'd mutter the number, embarrassed, and she'd grin. "Good. You're planting seeds. Stop digging them up to check if they're growing." One night, after a particularly brutal rejection from a luxury chain I had dared to dream about, Elena leaned across the bar and said, "Listen, Amelia, people like Victoria, they think legacy is inheritance, but legacy is built. And you," she tapped my chest with her pen, "you're building one. Don't let them trick you out of it." Her faith steadied me when my own faltered. Meanwhile, Victoria seemed to sense the distance I was creating. She grew bolder, louder. She'd call Daniel during his commute, filling his head with critiques disguised as advice. "Amelia is lovely, but don't you want someone who complements your career? Appearances matter, darling." At dinners, she'd lean close to me with that rehearsed smile. "Don't worry, Amelia. Not everyone is meant for ambition. Some are meant for support." I'd nod, swallowing my anger, and later pour it into another cover letter. Even Marissa joined the chorus. She posted a video one night titled, "What Not to Do," at a family dinner, clearly mocking me, fumbling with a wine glass, her voiceover chirping about standards. Thousands liked it. Daniel never said a word. Each jab, each slight became fuel. Not the kind that burned out quickly, but the kind that smolders, steady and patient. Then came the email. The Crescent Hotel, a name whispered in the hospitality industry with reverence, invited me to interview for an assistant events manager role. My hands shook as I read it. I had to sit down, reread it 3 times before I believed it wasn't a mistake. I didn't tell Daniel, not Victoria, not Marissa. Only Elena, who shrieked so loudly that Mr. DeLuca poked his head out of the office. She hugged me tight, then pulled back with a grin. "This is it, Mila. This is the door out. Walk through it and don't look back." For the first time in years, I felt it, the faint hum of power returning. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was preparing. And Victoria, in her arrogance, was too busy tightening her grip to notice the rope slipping from her hands. The morning of the interview, I woke before dawn, nerves buzzing in my veins. My black dress hung ironed and ready, the same one I'd worn for DeLuca's holiday gala. Simple, professional, nothing Victoria could sneer at if she ever saw it. I brushed my hair twice as long as usual, steadying myself in the mirror. "You belong there," I whispered. "You've belonged all along." The Crescent Hotel rose like a cathedral of glass and marble, its revolving doors spinning with people who looked like they had never worked a double shift in their lives. I stepped inside and was immediately wrapped in the scent of lilies and polished wood. Every surface gleamed. Even the silence seemed expensive. The panel interview was intimidating. 3 managers, crisp suits, eyes sharp with expectation. But when they asked about handling high-pressure environments, I thought of Friday nights at DeLuca's, when 12 tables snapped their fingers at once. When they asked about conflict resolution, I recalled smoothing over quarrels between feuding families with nothing but patience and refills. By the time I described organizing a last-minute engagement dinner after a storm cut the power, they were leaning forward, nodding. For once, my experience wasn't dismissed as restaurant work. It was respected as strategy, adaptability, leadership. They saw me. 2 days later, the email arrived. "We are delighted to offer you the position of Assistant Events Manager at the Crescent Hotel." I stared at the screen until the words blurred, then pressed a trembling hand to my mouth. I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. I just exhaled, long and slow, the kind of breath you release after years of holding it. That night, I met Elena at our usual corner booth before closing. When I told her, she clapped so hard a customer turned to look. "Mila, this is it. Do you understand what this means? Crescent isn't just a job. It's a stage. You'll run events Victoria can only dream of being invited to." I smiled, though a part of me still felt fragile, as though speaking it too loudly might break it. "I haven't told Daniel," I admitted. "Not yet." Her eyes darkened. "Don't. Not until the ink's dry. He'll tell her and she'll find some way to twist it. Keep this for yourself until you're ready to show the world." I nodded, clutching the offer letter like a secret talisman. At home, Daniel noticed my mood. "You seem lighter," he said, searching my face. I kissed his cheek and said only, "It was a good day." He smiled absently, already distracted by a buzz from his phone. Probably Victoria. I didn't care. For the first time in years, I had something no one could take from me. When Victoria called later that week to announce the special family dinner she'd planned for my birthday, her tone was syrupy sweet. "We'll make it a night to remember," she promised. She had no idea how right she was, because tucked inside my bag, hidden from every cross at that table, was a truth stronger than any velvet box. My revenge wasn't a plot. It was a contract. Signed, sealed, and waiting for the perfect reveal. Victoria always knew how to make an entrance. So when she phoned me a week before my birthday, her voice was silk-laced with steel. "Darling," she said, stretching the word as though we were dear friends instead of sparring opponents. "I've taken the liberty of planning a dinner for you. The Bellinton, of course. Only the best. Just family and a few close friends. You'll want to wear something elegant. We'll take photos. The Bellinton. Marble floors, chandeliers like constellations. Waiters who glide rather than walk. A place so far above my paycheck, it might as well have been orbiting the moon." "Victoria, you don't need to—" "Nonsense," she cut in. "You only turned 29 once. We must mark the occasion properly. Besides, Daniel insists. I glanced at my husband across the room, slouched on the couch scrolling through his phone. He didn't look up. Of course he hadn't insisted. Victoria never needed permission to stage a play. Fine, I said quietly. I'll be there. When I hung up, the silence pressed heavy. Daniel didn't even ask what she'd said. I think he already knew. At DeLuca's that night, I told Elena. She set down a tray of glasses a little too hard. The Bellinton? For you? On Victoria's dime? She narrowed her eyes. That's not a celebration. That's a performance. And you're not the guest of honor, Mila. You're the prop. I sighed, leaning against the bar. She said it's just family. Exactly, Elena shot back. Family that records your mistakes for sport. Family that claps when you shrink. She's planning something. I can feel it. So could I. A pit had opened in my stomach the moment Victoria said photos. But instead of fear, another thought flickered. If she was setting the stage, maybe she was also building mine. Because I had something she didn't know about. Something that could turn her carefully orchestrated spectacle into her own undoing. The days leading up to the dinner were strange. Daniel was restless, distracted, pacing the apartment like a man rehearsing lines. He bought me flowers twice in 1 week, lilies, my least favorite, which told me they were really Victoria's choice. He avoided eye contact when I asked about Friday, mumbling, "It'll be fine, just go along with it. Go along with it," the motto of our marriage. I smiled instead, hiding the letter tucked safely inside my bag. My official contract from the Crescent Hotel, with my start date bold at the top. Signed and sealed. Proof that while they plotted my humiliation, I had already secured my escape. On the evening of my birthday, I dressed in my black sheath dress, the one Victoria couldn't sneer at, and heels that made me walk taller than I felt. When I met Elena in the staff alley before my shift, she pressed a silver charm into my hand. "For luck," she said, squeezing my fingers. "And remember, you don't owe them a performance, but if they try to force one, own the stage." I carried those words with me as Daniel and I walked into the Bellinton. The chandelier light pooled like liquid gold. Violins hummed in the background, and a dozen expectant faces turned toward me. Victoria rose, flawless in emerald silk, arms outstretched like she was introducing the guest of honor at a gala. "Amelia," she sang. "Happy birthday, dear. Tonight is all about you." Her smile was the kind that makes your skin prickle. And in that moment, I knew she wasn't wrong. Tonight would be all about me. Just not the way she planned. The Bellinton's dining room glittered like a jewel box, every detail polished to gleam. Waiters moved silently between linen-draped tables, pouring wine that shimmered like rubies. I felt the air shift the moment I stepped inside. Conversations dipped, heads turned. All eyes drifted toward the Cross family table where Victoria reigned, emerald silk glowing beneath the chandelier. She greeted me with air kisses that landed nowhere near my skin. "Birthday girl," she trilled, her bracelets clinking like applause. "We've planned something unforgettable." Unforgettable. The word sat heavy in my chest. We took our seats, Daniel at my side, Marissa already angling her phone for the perfect frame. Victoria at the head with that smile honed sharper than crystal. The first courses passed in a blur. Tiny bites of foie gras, scallops swimming in butter. I hardly tasted them. My senses were tuned to the hum of expectation threading the table. Daniel shifted constantly in his chair. Marissa whispered to her phone. Victoria glowed, as though savoring a joke no one else had heard yet. Then, as the pianist's song slowed into a languid birthday melody, a waiter appeared at my side. On his silver tray sat a small velvet box, the kind meant for diamonds. My breath caught. Marissa's phone tilted closer. The box was set in front of me with practiced ceremony. I lifted the lid. Inside lay not a ring, not earrings, not even a necklace. A pen. Gold, gleaming, nestled in satin. A hush spread across the table. Guests at nearby tables glanced over. Curiosity snagged like fabric on a nail. Victoria's voice floated across the silence. Happy birthday, darling. Tonight we give you a gift of freedom. It's time you sign for your future. She gestured to Daniel. He cleared his throat, eyes glued to the tablecloth. With fumbling hands, he slid a manila envelope across to me. Legal weight pressed against the paper. Divorce papers. The room tilted, sound muffled as though I'd slipped underwater. My birthday dinner staged not as a celebration, but an execution. Marissa grinned, camera steady. Smile, Amelia, she cooed. This is history. My fingers hovered over the pen, the table's eyes drilling into me, waiting for collapse, for tears, an outburst, a scene they could record and replay like a victory. But I didn't cry, I didn't shake, I didn't even blink. I let the silence stretch until it grew unbearable. Then I set the pen down carefully, folded my hands, and lifted my eyes straight into Victoria's. Interesting gift, I said softly, each word deliberate. But you should know, I already signed my future, and it has nothing to do with you. Her smile faltered, just for a flicker. Marissa's phone lowered an inch. Daniel's napkin twisted to shreds in his fists. I leaned back in my chair, calm as still water, letting them stew in confusion. Revenge wasn't about raising your voice. Sometimes it was about lowering it, until everyone had to lean in to hear. And they were leaning now. For a heartbeat, the whole restaurant held its breath. Forks hovered above plates. The pianist stumbled into silence, and every gaze was locked on me. The pen still gleamed between us, heavy with Victoria's intent. She was waiting for me to break. Daniel was waiting for me to sign. Marissa was waiting for her viral clip. But instead, I smiled, slowly, deliberately. I see, I said, my voice carrying through the hush. You wanted tonight to be memorable. Well, it will be. I reached into my bag and drew out a cream-colored folder. Not the one Victoria had planted, but the one I had brought, my own gift. I slid it onto the table and tapped the cover gently. You thought you'd surprise me with divorce papers, but here's a surprise for you. I've already accepted a new position. Assistant events manager at the Crescent Hotel. I start in 2 weeks. Gasps scattered around the table like dropped silverware. Marissa's phone wobbled. Daniel's head snapped up, eyes wide. And Victoria's smile cracked like porcelain. Just for an instant. The Crescent, she repeated, her voice thin. That's impossible. Nothing's impossible when you've worked for it, I replied evenly. All those nights you mocked me for serving tables. I was learning, managing crises, perfecting details, skills your world never gave me credit for. A murmur rose from the surrounding diners, curiosity mixing with admiration. Some actually began to clap softly, the sound growing as if the whole room had been waiting for this twist. My co-workers from DeLuca's, seated near the bar, whistled and cheered. I turned my gaze back to Victoria. You tried to give me freedom with a pen, but I already gave it to myself. So thank you, really. This dinner is the perfect send-off. For me, not for your performance. The effect was immediate. Victoria's composure slipped, her hands tightening around her wine glass. Daniel stammered, Amelia, why didn't you tell me? Would you have celebrated, I asked quietly? Or would you have told your mother first so she could spin it into another reason I wasn't good enough? He had no answer. His silence was louder than a confession. The applause swelled again, diners raising glasses in my direction. The pianist, catching the mood, slid into a triumphant tune. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of humiliation shift off my shoulders and back onto the people who had tried to orchestrate it. Marissa fumbled with her phone, trying to salvage the recording, but Elena's voice cut through the din from the bar. Make sure you capture her standing tall. Not what you expected. I laughed then, real laughter, free and unshaken. Happy birthday to me, I said, lifting my water glass in a toast. Here's to new beginnings. And the room echoed back, to Amelia. Victoria's stage had become mine, and she hadn't even seen it coming. The applause faded into chatter, but the shift in power lingered like the aftertaste of strong wine. I sat taller in my chair, the velvet box pushed aside, the Crescent Hotel contract gleaming in its place. For once, all eyes weren't on Victoria. They were on me. Victoria tried to recover, her smile stretched too tight. "Well," she said, lifting her glass as though she were still the hostess of this spectacle. "What a development. How fortunate for you, Amelia. Though, of course, a hotel is hardly the same as true society work." Her words fell flat. The diners who had cheered me moments earlier exchanged knowing glances, unimpressed by her attempt to claw back control. Daniel finally found his voice, low and uncertain. "Amelia, maybe we rushed into this. Maybe we could talk." I turned to him, my heart strangely calm. "Talk? After you sat here and let your mother humiliate me? After you pushed that envelope across the table without even meeting my eyes?" His mouth opened, then closed again. Silence. Always silence when it mattered most. Marissa muttered something about overreaction, but kept her phone lowered now, her smirk gone. Without the drama she had hoped to capture, her role in the performance crumbled too. The restaurant manager approached cautiously, clearly aware of the scene that had unfolded. "Miss Cross," he said, addressing me directly. "On behalf of the Bellinton, we'd like to offer you a complimentary dessert for your birthday. You've certainly made the evening unforgettable." The subtlest insult. They had set the trap, but I was the one rewarded. I smiled, thanked him, and declined. I already had what I needed. When the plates were cleared and the wine dulled, I stood. "Thank you for the dinner," I said to Victoria, my tone sharp as crystal. "It was the perfect farewell. You wanted me out of your family. Consider your wish granted." Her eyes flared, but I didn't wait for her reply. I slipped my contract back into my bag, lifted my chin, and walked away from the table. Diners nodded at me as I passed. Some even applauded again, a strange, beautiful chorus of validation from strangers who saw what my own family never had. At the door, I glanced back once. Daniel sat slumped, Marissa frozen. Victoria's hand clenched around her glass as though holding tighter could mend what had shattered. But the crown she'd tried to wear that night had already slipped, and I was done bowing to it. The night at the Bellinton became a story told by others. Strangers who'd been there recounted it like a fable, the birthday girl who turned humiliation into triumph. Word spread faster than I could have imagined. Victoria's carefully constructed image as the Cross matriarch cracked in whispers, while I found myself walking lighter, as though every step was mine again. 2 weeks later, I walked through the Crescent Hotel's glass doors, not as a guest, not as an outsider, but as staff, assistant events manager. The marble floors reflected my heels. The scent of lilies greeted me again. But this time, I didn't feel small. I belonged. My first week was a whirlwind of meetings, timelines, and late-night planning sessions for a gala so grand it would make Victoria salivate. And yet, for once, the thought of her didn't sting. It made me smile. Elena visited one evening, standing in awe of the lobby's glittering chandelier. "Look at you," she whispered. "Running the kind of place Victoria only drops by to gawk at. This is your empire now." She was right. The Crescent wasn't just a job. It was my stage, my sanctuary, my proof that I was never the background character they tried to make me. Daniel tried to call. Twice. His messages were scattered, fumbling. "We can talk." I made mistakes. Mom went too far, but I never answered. My silence was my answer. He had chosen his place at Victoria's table, and I had chosen mine, far away, built of my own strength. Victoria, I heard through whispers, tried to spin the Bellinton dinner as a misunderstanding, but no one bought it. Guests remembered too clearly. Marissa stopped posting about me altogether, her curated feed suddenly missing the sister-in-law she once mocked for content. They had erased me, yes, but in doing so, they had erased themselves. On my first Friday night at the Crescent, as the gala unfolded seamlessly under my direction, I stood at the edge of the ballroom and watched guests marvel at details I had orchestrated. Candles glowing just bright enough, champagne poured without pause, music swelling like a tide. For years, Victoria had claimed I didn't fit, but here I wasn't fitting into someone else's world. I was building my own. I thought back to that velvet box, to the pen gleaming like a trap, and I realized something. They had tried to write my ending, but I had taken the pen back. I had written my beginning.